It's Tuesday, the 18th of July. What does that mean? It's International Nelson Mandela Day today, Kendall, and of course it's a glorious day in celebration of Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, an iconic leader of our times, and all of us are really fortunate to have been alive during his trials as well as his victories.
Now, he spent, of course, a lot of time in jail, 27 years in jail. He spent 67 years of his life dedicating his life to freedom and, of course, to humanity, especially for us South Africans. And that's why we're asking you the question, of course, on the poll. In fact, on the question of the day. Yes?
Absolutely. We'd like to find out from you, on this day, the 18th of July, 2017, how do you plan to be spending your 67 minutes for Nelson Mandela International Day?
That's the question. Let us know what's on your mind, and let's take a look at what you are telling us in the meantime. You are tweeting us already as to what you're going to do. Let's take a look. Tweets there? Yes? Can we get the tweets? Well, they're coming slowly but surely, but they come.
And here we go. Katlego comes in with that first one. I'm going to collect all those kids in my village who can't afford 30 rand for the barber shop and give them haircuts for free, just for today, because I'm a barber myself.
Hey, congratulations, Katlego. What a wonderful way to start Nelson Mandela Day. This one from Sitsaba says, I will log out with social media 67 minutes. That's what Sitsaba's going to do. So he's not going to watch the show for, in fact, he's not going to be online for 67 minutes.
He's going to save it for later, after the show, aren't you, Sitsaba? Eric Green says, I'll be at work smiling through the day, giving free compliments, even if it ain't due.
Hey, hey, hey. So says Eric. Well, let's take a look at our question, in fact, on our poll today.
Yeah.
That's our poll, what we're conducting today. We're looking at President Jacob Zuma, who says that radical socio-economic transformation remains part of government strategy to fight unemployment, poverty and inequality. And, of course, he mentioned that white monopoly still is real.
Exactly. So we want to find out from you. The President made these utterances. What do you think? He insists that white monopoly capital is a reality. Do you agree, is our question to you on our poll.
So far, 190 votes in. 52% of you are saying, yes, we agree with the president that white monopoly capital is real. And Sitsaba also comes in and says, yes, I agree 100% with the president.
And Gosi Thomas comes in and says he must stop criticizing them and do something about the capital because it's killing the poor.
This one from Katlego says, whites contribute more on our economy than blacks. It's a reality, and their standard of living is better than those of blacks in an inequality is still real. So says Katlego. These are some of your comments. Please keep them coming. We'll read those comments as we continue. But we also have a sporting question today on the Proteas that did very well yesterday.
They did extremely well yesterday. The Proteas are hammering England out at Trent Bridge in Nottingham. A 340-run victory was the final score there. And we'd like to find out from you at home, what do you think the catalyst was in the Proteas' victory over England?
Did they drink something? Did they do something? What did they do? Let's take a look at what you're telling us.
I think most people are going to be talking about maybe Captain Fantastic. Jamila van der Skeefs comes in and she says, I think that South African athletes are trying to prove themselves to the world. Good luck to all.
This one from Katlego says, I think the catalyst is the motivation from the women's team, and that pushed them up their game. Maybe the fire is back. Big up to the Proteas, and that could be right because
100%.
the women's team are doing fantastically.
They're playing
well
in the semi-final against England a little later today.
Exactly.
And Onuka Christian says, give it to Faf and his boys. They played with all their hearts. Absolutely they did, and hence that fantastic win, setting England a record total to chase.
And that's how we want our players to play, with their sleeve or with their heart on their sleeves.
100%.
Right? But it's down to business now. Let's take a look at your headlines. It's International Mandela Day today. The day was officially declared by the United Nations in November 2009. President Jacob Zuma has once again called on South Africans to unite and defeat racism. He was giving the keynote address at the inaugural Nelson Mandela Memorial Lecture in Inyanga Township. And calls for the removal of President Jacob Zuma intensifies. This as over 90 civil society organizations will gather at the Rhema Church in Randburg, north of Johannesburg this morning to build a new front against state capture. Now, those are all your headlines. But before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall what's happening in the sports before he takes us to the news.
Well, Elvis, thank you very much. Good morning to you. This is what we've got planned for you in the sports today.
Here we go. That is the end of the game. 2-2.
Captain Fantastic Faf du Plessis returns and the Proteas destroy England at Trent Bridge, winning by 340 runs within just 4 days after setting the hosts a record total to chase.
This test match was important for us. If we get ourselves in the position of strength, how long we can force that period of almost dominating the opposition to stay on our side. And I thought that we did it brilliantly. You know, since day one, we haven't lost that momentum.
In the meantime, the Queen Proteas will seek to make history when they face off against England in the first semi-final of the 2017 ICC Women's World Cup in Bristol.
I think that's maybe a good thing, the inexperience, you know, not really afraid of anything. So, yeah, no, really excited.
And former Namibian sprinter Frankie Fredericks has been provisionally suspended from athletics, pending an investigation into a potential ethics violation. Now, all this and more we've got for you later on in the Sports Bulletin. But for now, let's go to our top stories for the day. President Jacob Zuma says radical socio-economic transformation remains part of the government's strategy to fight unemployment, poverty and inequality. Zuma was delivering the Nelson Mandela Memorial Lecture in Nyanga Township outside Cape Town last night.
Zuma says the government has identified the expropriation of land as part of fighting poverty. At the same time, he rubbished those who reject the concept and the existence of white monopoly capital.
We say we want to transform the structure, the system, the institutions. That's what we want to do. The patterns of ownership and management and control, so that it is not done by a few, which we call white monopoly capital.
He also encouraged the ANC to unite, saying it's the only organization that can make people realize a better life for all. The president also defended his leadership of the organization. He says the party under his leadership is the same as the one under Nelson Mandela.
They will tell you, Madiba's ANC was something else, not this one. As if the ANC is standing in one place. It has not changed the ANC. But if they want to confuse you, they say, at times, even those who belong to the ANC, they get taken away by propaganda repeated continuously.
He also encouraged people to follow Nelson Mandela's sacrifices and selflessness. Zuma described Mandela as a great leader of a special kind. Manilis Tubase, SABC News, Cape Town.
Meanwhile, calls for the removal of President Jacob Zuma are intensifying. Over 90 civil society organizations will gather at the Rhema Church in Randburg this morning to build a new front against state capture. The one-day gathering is convened by the Conference for the Future of South Africa. Among those attending will be the Reverend Frank Chikani, Popo Molefe, and the ANC's Dr. Makosi Khoza. Now, more about all of this a little later on. For now, it's back to Elvis, who's going to take you through the next section.
Thank you, Kendall. For more on that story, we now cross to our SABC News reporter, Griselda Lewis, who is live at Rhema. Very good morning to you, Griselda, and welcome. Griselda, are you there?
Well, thank you very much, Elvis.
Yes. Can you sketch us a picture as to what is happening there this morning?
Well, Elvis, as the world remembers former President Nelson Mandela, a number of civil society organizations, including other foundations, including the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, OUTA, as well as Safe South Africa, are gathering for this one-day conference to talk about some of the most pressing issues that are facing South Africa today. Part of that agenda includes state capture as well as state resources, wasteful state resources, as well as corruption. Those are some of the issues that will be discussed here today. And I think one of the many questions, quite pertinent, I think, that this discussion begins on a day that is commemorating former President Nelson Mandela. We'll chat to the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation in just the next few minutes, but I think what many will be asking here today is whether the former President Nelson Mandela would be happy with the state of South Africa today. Let's chat now to Nishan Bolton, who's with the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, just one of the organizations who's part of this discussion here today. Nishan, thank you very much for your time this morning, a one-day conference to discuss the future of South Africa. And some of the key things on this agenda include some of the pressing issues that South Africa is facing today.
Our country is in crisis, and it's a crisis brought on or made worse by decisions taken in the last 18 months. The firing of the minister, the downgrades that we've experienced, the rampant looting of state coffers has deprived our country of much needed resources for particularly service delivery for the poor and the working class people of this country. And that's why we're gathering here today, because we think that all of the work done to date to voice concerns around state capture has been done by individual organizations, very, very good work. We now need to say, how do we strengthen that, how do we consolidate it, and how do we take it to an even greater level of action and awareness.
How's that going to happen? Because this is not the first time that you've raised concerns about a number of these issues that I mentioned, about corruption, about state capture, and a range of other issues. But you have been on the streets already, well, at least Save South Africa and others. And it doesn't seem like much has been done to heed the calls, for example, for President Jacob Zuma to step down. What do you hope to achieve by this conversation in strengthening that call for some kind of change?
So if you look at the issue of the welfare grants, had it not been for organizations like the Black Sash, then we would have ended up with a huge mess. So that's but one example of the victories scored by civil society in the last 1 to 2 years. They have effected, through legal and other ways, changes of corrupt heads of departments. We've managed to get the cancellation of this contract with CPS. And there's a wide variety of areas of work that civil society organizations on their own have been involved in. What we are saying here, the 100 or more organizations need to complement and support work that's already been done, and we need to explore other avenues to intensify the pressure. Yes, we have marched. Yes, we have demonstrated. But we need to be doing that on a more consistent basis. We need to be exploring all legal options available. But we also need to be putting policy proposals on fixing up the mess that we are in once we get to the point of a new government coming into place after 2019. Because civil society needs to place on board a set of proposals to rebuild state integrity. And that's one of the key commissions that we are having today, is a set of proposals on rebuilding state integrity.
Some would argue and say it would be quite, I guess, suspicious, putting quite a number of these pressing issues. Yes, there are issues that are facing South Africa, but there are issues relating to free education, to poverty. Those are some of the other things that South Africans have been grappling with for the longest time, yet you've never had such a gathering to discuss issues that are facing the majority of people in this country, including those that I've just mentioned.
Well, if you look at education, and you look at the amount of money siphoned off through corruption, our argument is that had that money not been siphoned off and diverted to weddings and palatial homes, then there would have been resources to deal with some of those key pressing social issues. There are other initiatives that are underway to address many of those concerns, and where possible, this particular initiative here and this collection of civil society organizations will find ways of supporting that. On their own, if you take Section 27, they have been in the forefront of much of what you are talking about. The Life Isidimeni and other issues are there. OUTA has likewise tackled the issue of toll roads and so forth. There are many organizations here who are very grassroots based, and over time what we are saying is that today is a start of civil society finding a more coherent voice, at least those organizations who are here, to deal with what we consider to be one of the most pressing issues. And as I've said, the answer to a lot of the socio-economic issues in this country lies with the leadership that this country has. With a new leadership and with us getting rid of wastage through corruption and maladministration, there should be sufficient resources to deal with some of the key pressing issues of this country.
Some of these groups have also been labelled as forces of regime change. We've heard President Jacob Zuma say over the past couple of weeks that fees must fall protests, while legitimate, yes, the Zuma must fall protests, while people feel they do have certain grievances, there is an underlying element of those who want to effect regime change in South Africa. What is your comment to that?
Sipho Patiana put it beautifully yesterday at the press conference. He's saying that he said there's already been regime change. And if you look at where major decisions of this country are made today, they're made in Saxon World. There's already been regime change. Much of the decisions about appointments, tenders and so forth don't get made by government or don't seem to be made by government at all. So in essence, there has been regime change. What we are arguing for is greater accountability of government. We want Parliament to play its oversight role over the executive. So regime change would mean that you would want to impose a one set of leaders over those that are democratically elected. This conference is not about that.
Quite, I think, opportune, I guess, that you also have this conference on a day commemorating Nelson Mandela. Do you think he would be concerned about the current state of affairs in South Africa?
Very difficult to say. I can speak for Ahmed Kathrada. I think he died very worried, very concerned about the state of this country. I think Madiba, likewise, with that same set of information and observations of what's happening today, would probably be just as concerned. But both of them, in the latter part of their lives, essentially said it's over to the new generation of South Africans to take forward the struggles and to continue to make this world a better place. As Madiba said, it's now in your hands. We think we are picking up on that call, and we are asking South Africans who are gathered here to take the future of this country into their own hands and to do what they can to build a better, a more accountable, transparent country led by people with integrity.
Well, the conference itself has not started, but perhaps some insight into what you've had or what you've said within the planning phases of this conference for the future of South Africa. One could say perhaps this could be just another talk shop. What are we looking at here? Perhaps an intensification of action on the streets, and how do you plan to lobby those within government, those within power, to listen to what you're saying?
We've invited all members of Parliament to come and observe. I doubt many of them will. If you take an organization like OUTA, it has given to every member of Parliament an extensive dossier on what they think are the key issues around the president. Section 27, Freedom Under Law, Helen Suzman Foundation, a whole lot of them have done that kind of work. We want to intensify and support existing initiatives. This conference will talk about what we think civil society's call needs to be to parliamentarians on the vote of no confidence. We will also talk about a program of action in the run-up to that and after that as well. But we will also talk about a program of action about leaders with integrity, as well as how to build integrity back into the systems, policies and procedures of government. One of the big things that we will be talking about today here is the role of public servants. And what is it that public servants need to do or should have done to have prevented state capture? And how do we support people like Magwaza, who by all accounts have been forced out of their post today? How do we support individuals who are standing up to corruption? And therefore today, one of the big highlights of today will be a panel discussion with Popo Molefe and Makosi Khoza on their experiences being at the receiving end of standing up for the right things in this country.
As the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, we know that there's a decision that's going to be made very shortly by the National Assembly Speaker, Baleka Mbete, on that whether the vote of no confidence itself will be cast in secret ballot or not. What would the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation's call be to ANC MPs?
Our call, as we've made public to all MPs, is to support the motion of no confidence, irrespective of whether it's secret or not.
Thank you very much for your time. Nishan Balton, who is the Executive Director of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. Well, Dr. Makosi Khoza, who is one of the ANC MPs who's been very vocal about the state of South Africa and also calling for that motion of no confidence to be held in secret ballot, is also here today. She's going to be one of the panelists who will also give her insight to some of her experiences, but we'll certainly bring you live here to when those discussions do get underway for this one-day conference on some of those pressing issues that are facing the country. Back to you in studio.
Thank you so much, Griselda Lewis. That's a reporter there on the scene. We'll probably go there a little bit later to find out what's happening. But right now, it's over to Kendall to give you some more Mandela news.
Thank you, Elvis. And to continue on the same thread, the South African National Blood Service has called on citizens to use their 67 minutes on this day to save lives.
The South African National Blood Service is calling for your help. It needs 3,000 donors each day to meet its target.
If you donate your 60 minutes to donate blood, that can be divided into 3, because 1 pint of blood that you donate during your 67 minutes is actually going to help 3 people at the same time. So it's like spending 67 minutes for each one of them.
Some of the regular donors express the importance of donating blood.
Well, in the spirit of Mandela Month, I think it is very important that we take, time out of your day and to just go down and help someone else.
For us, donating blood, it means to save a life, whether it's old people or babies, anyone injured. At that moment, they can survive. They can have a chance in their lives.
So saving a baby's life, saving a person's life is it's great. And that is my part that I can do every year and every second month.
Anyone over 50 kilograms living a healthy lifestyle can donate blood and save lives. Ishmael Mudiba, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
There you go. There's another way that you can be useful on this 18th of July 2017. Now, various activities have been lined up in honor of the International Nelson Mandela Day in Limpopo. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa will be handing over an early childhood development center in Mokopong. Transport Minister Joe Masangani will be painting a school and distributing sanitary towels to learners at Bochum outside Polokwane. In the Eastern Cape town of Mthatha, residents are prepared to welcome hundreds of dignitaries and guests who will be attending celebrations.
Mthatha is expected to come to a standstill. Its most famous son will be celebrated. Locals and dignitaries reflecting on his life. The theme for this year is reconciliation and non-racialism.
We are specifically looking at non-racialism and also reconciliation, as we are expecting, people from other races as well.
The Michigan State University is a partner of the museum. Representatives of the university say the youth must remember that it is in their power to transform the education system of the country.
Black American in the United States, education has been something that we had to fight for. And if you want change to happen, you have to fight for those things. Caroling in the United States, we have the opportunity to go to school on particular grants and things of that nature, but it didn't come without a fight. So I stand by the students for their fight for access to a better education, because everyone cannot afford it, and so the government has to subsidize and assist in some type of way.
The 67 Minutes campaign also remains strong. Locals have committed themselves to it.
We are so grateful for this great opportunity that this Nelson Mandela birthday celebration will be held here in town. When the event is held in Uno, it's not so easy for everyone to access it or to come and attend the event. But now it has been brought in town so that everyone can have an access, everyone can come and celebrate Nelson Mandela Day.
We will be identifying 2 families. Then we go to shop and buy them some groceries or maybe some blankets, whatever they will be needing to celebrate the Mandela Day.
Ladies and gentlemen,
museum says it has also recorded an increase of visitors since the beginning of the month. Simkita Mangunana, SABC News, Mthatha.
Right now, to carry on with the same conversation, Elvis, I just wanted to check with you. I mean, today I believe that Nelson Mandela would have been 99 had he still been alive.
Yes, 99 years old, and of course we celebrate his day every day on this day on the 18th of July. Now, the Nelson Mandela Foundation is here with us. Vern Harris will be chatting to us more about today, and of course there's also the issue of the 67 minutes that people need to spend today. We'll elaborate on that, and the question, of course, we pose to our viewers today is, what are they doing for their 67 minutes?
Very good.
Well, I'll be donating some blood today. I don't know about you.
No, think about it.
All right. Well, it's always continuing. Qunu in the Eastern Cape is expected to come alive as hundreds of dignitaries attend the Nelson Mandela Day celebrations today. For the latest, our SABC reporter Zimkita Mqinana is in Qunu. A very good morning to you and welcome, Zimkita.
A very good morning, Elvis, and a warm welcome to the Eastern Cape today. Well, residents of this town have committed themselves to getting their hands dirty and join millions of other people who are going to be spending their 67 minutes doing good to others, trying to uphold the values and making the spirit of the Nelson Mandela live amongst them in this community. We are right in front of his Qunu residence where he was laid to rest 3 years ago. People of this area are very excited. We're just going to speak to the locals here to hear their views on this special day. Mama, sikwamkele enkqubeni yethu, uziva njani ungumhlali waseQunu kwaye uTata Mandela uba besaphila ngekuthiwa uyazalwa namhlanje?
Ndiziva ndinevuyo ukuzalwa kaTata Mandela namhlanje. Ndinevuyo kakhulu ngozalwa kwakhe. Dena ingxaki esinayo thina apha ematyeni kwindawo yasematyeni kungabi nambani, abantu bayalayita asilayiti thina.
Mama, wena njengoba kuthiwa makwenziwe into ye-67 minutes, ingaba mhlambi ningabahlali balapha niyayazi lento ye-67 minutes bayintoni?
Hayi, asiyazi bayintoni le nto.
Okay, well, she is saying that she's happy that the world is celebrating Nelson Mandela Day today. However, just behind Mandela residence, where she comes from, there is no electricity, and she'd like that the area be electrified. But we're just going to speak to young people who are also celebrating this day. Wena ungumuntu omtsha le Nelson Mandela Day xa kuthethwa ngayo yintoni ethi qatha engqondweni?
Siyavuya nge-birthday kaMandela ngoba thina kulaa ndawo yethu asinambani, asinandlela, asifumani misebenzi. Xa sohlika ezitopini siyaleqwa apha endleleni.
Le nto yokuleqwa kwenu ingaba yinto enenza nizive ningabahlali baseMpuma Koloni nixhalabile?
Into esiyivayo kule ndlela sileqwa ngabantwana abafuna usikhuthuza apha endleleni.
Okay, well, Elvis, the people of this area are happy that it's Nelson Mandela Day today, but as Tabisa just alluded here, she's worried that the job opportunities are not enough for young people. She's also concerned of crime in this area, saying that right here in front of this Mandela residence, when the taxis drop them when they come from town, there are violent people that chase after them, wanting to rob them of their goods. Well, those are some of the concerns. However, government officials are crisscrossing this town of Mthatha today. There will also be a donation of seedlings, which is going to revive agriculture in this area and encourage people to plant in their vegetable gardens, so that if they don't have money to buy food, they know in their small gardens they've got vegetables to get something to eat. Some of them will be able to sell to others. So within the 67 minutes that is being done today, they're also encouraging that even if you don't have something to buy for someone, go and visit someone so that you can put a smile on their face. So the Nelson Mandela Museum will be busy. They will also be donating
temporary structures to the Unu clinic that doesn't have a waiting area. We see children there when it's raining. They have to queue outside and be to get more sick because the rain and the sun and the inclement weather that they have to sustain while queuing there. So that temporary shelter that they will be given will make a difference in their lives. That's the message that everyone is spreading today, that do something no matter how small it is in your 65 minutes. Please make a change in your 67 minutes and put a smile on somebody's face. That's back to you in Johannesburg.
Thank you, Zimkita. Thank you for that update there. We'll cross a little bit later to find out what's happening there. Now, Twitter, social media is ablaze. So let's take a look at what's happening on Twitter. And we start off with #Mandela Day, as the country and many around the world celebrate the life and times of the iconic freedom fighter and the first black president of South Africa, Tata Nelson Mandela, who would have been 99 years old today. Now, we are reminded to live up to his legacy and do a bit of good for others today, even if it's just for 67 minutes. The annual Trek for Mandela team is expected to summit Mount Kilimanjaro today. Now, they're raising funds in order to donate sanitary pads to the girls in need. Now, later on, we'll speak to them to find out a little bit more about that particular initiative and where are the trekkers today. And advocate Thuli Madonsela says, on International Mandela Day, let's not remember only his kindness, but also his unwavering commitment to the rule of law, unity, and peace. Former public protector there. Then moving on, cold conditions can be felt throughout the country as the cold front confront us here in South Africa. Cape Town is even experiencing some snow. Just take a look at these beautiful pictures coming from that region. There it is in the Western Cape. They're very cold, and of course snow all over the place, as you can see there. Some of those beautiful pictures coming through. Moving further afield now, Australian firefighters are flying to Canada to assist with their wildfires that have wreaked havoc in the past few days. National parks have been closed and residents of the surrounding areas have been evacuated, as you can see there. Terrible fires. Now, remember, our firefighters also went there last year, but then, of course, scandal again because they were toy-toying in Canada and were sent back home. Well, there you have it. Now, they're taking the Australians. I don't know if they will toy-toy because, obviously, it won't happen. But one picture, our picture of the day, comes from Simply Tseli, and it's captioned, "Humility describes Madiba." If only we could take a page out of his book. There you have it. Nelson Mandela Day today. Make a difference, people. We must use our time wisely and forever realize that. Our comment of the day comes from Karabo Makobo, and he says, good morning, beautiful people. Today is Mandela Day. Make a difference in someone's life. Be the change you want to see in the world. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about Nelson Mandela Day a little bit later with Vern Harris just after the break. But first, let's take a look at what's happening in our courts today. We start off in Polokwane, where a 46-year-old man arrested for operating an illegal initiation school in Limpopo is expected to appear before the Messina Magistrates Court. Calvin Napawe was arrested twice this month for operating an illegal initiation school between Harper and Campbell Farms in Messina. Napawe allegedly collected initiates from their homes after he was released on bail and reopened the school when he was arrested for a second time. He's out on 5,000 rand bail. Then in Maikeng, the judgment is expected today in the bail application of four suspects charged with the kidnapping of an 18-year-old Maikeng businessman. Lebohang Lefifi and his three accomplices allegedly kidnapped Mohammed Musa at his home in Maikeng earlier this month. They were arrested in Tahong and Maikeng after demanding 1.5 million rand as a ransom. However, they did manage to withdraw 9,000 rand during that kidnapping. Then in Kimberley, 6 men are expected to stand trial in the Kimberley High Court for the murder of the DA councillor, Johannes Baikies, and his business partner. They were ambushed and killed 3 weeks after last year's local government elections. He was found dead on the main road between Daniel Scale and Posmasburg on August the 17th. His business partner, Shuping Nosi, was also shot and he died in hospital. Now, we'll keep you updated on these stories, so you have to stay tuned. But tomorrow, let's see what's happening tomorrow. We will be looking at the suspension of the proposed mining charter. Controversy abound, I can tell you. You don't want to miss it. But we'll take a break. And after that, Vern Harris is in the studio from the Nelson Mandela Foundation to tell us more.
What guides us? Is it something you can see? Hear? Feel? Or touch? What leads us onto greater experiences? Is it the words of our sacred texts? The advice of our elders? Or is it the actions of our people? The strength of our beliefs? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Staying with International Nelson Mandela Day, off to New York, the Big Apple, where Nelson Mandela's values of building a future where everyone can live in peace, prosperity and in harmony with nature remain principles central to what drives the United Nations every day. That's the word from senior officials at the global organization when Nelson Mandela International Day was birthed in the General Assembly almost 8 years ago. Hollywood star and UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador Danny Glover will headline the official commemoration in New York today.
Madiba, I love you so much. The greatest president of the world.
While it was the General Assembly at the UN that declared Nelson Mandela Day in November 2009, it was this concert, featuring some of the biggest names in music a few months earlier, that created all the buzz. The first UN Day named after an individual that is growing in popularity around the world.
We see increased interest from our colleagues in the field and also here at headquarters of doing something on Nelson Mandela Day to actually represent the spirit and the meaning of what that day was about, public service and supporting the values that Nelson Mandela embraced.
In partnership with the City of New York, the General Assembly will host the official commemoration with actor and activist Danny Glover as the keynote speaker. Officials and diplomats will later in the day head to Randall's Island, just north of Manhattan where we are, to clean the shoreline and work on an urban farm. And in a world of turmoil and suffering, a rapidly changing climate, and a development agenda vast and growing, Madiba's values have never been more relevant.
Change can also start with us. Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for 27 years, and when he came out, instead of being bitter and angry, he actually spoke about collaboration and openness and reaching out. And he embodies a vision that wants to build a future that is based on collaboration that supports what the United Nations supports.
Previous commemorations have featured old friends with words worth remembering.
First, you can't free anybody else and you can't serve anybody else unless first you free yourself from bitterness and hatred and resentment and the paralysis they bring. Mandela walked out of prison after 27 years a greater man than he went in.
The United Nations has played its part in liberating the people of South Africa. Now you play an even more important role of keeping alive the values that Madiba has given us.
The UN just days ago launching the Fez Plan of Action with the world's religious leaders, an initiative to curb atrocities around the globe.
Mandela, thanks to his wisdom, thanks to his concern of managing diversity in the most constructive manner, decided to build a rainbow nation where there will be no white, no black, no Indian, no Christian, no animist, but simply South African. And that is why I am glad that in the course of this Mandela Day, around this period, we are launching this project, and I wish Mandela also continue to inspire the entire world, which is unfortunately a world where we need everybody, member state, civil society, everybody should join efforts.
Gone but not forgotten, and an example that lives on in all of us, 67 minutes at a time. Sherwin Ricepees, SABC News, New York.
There you have it. Now joining us in studio is the Director of Archives and Dialogue at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Vern Harris. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Morning, Elvis.
Now today is the big day for Madiba. As the foundation, what are you doing to celebrate today?
Well, we're spread quite thinly. Some of us are out there working at various sites. Some of us, like me, are sitting at tables talking to people like you.
Now, it is a big day, and of course, everybody is celebrating it. But looking back at the dream of Madiba of having a rainbow nation, and if you just can maybe glance back over the years, has his dream been achieved, do you think?
Well, clearly not. But I would argue that his dream was not a rainbow nation. That was Archbishop Tutu's concept. I think Madiba's concept of reconciliation was far more complex and required long-term hard work. And arguably, that long-term hard work has not been implemented, and that's why we're in the trouble we're in.
What is that hard work that you're referring to, and the complexity of his dream?
The hard work fundamentally is about transforming our society. And transforming the economy. We talk about radical economic change now. Well, that's what we needed back in the 1990s. And because we haven't shifted the structures of power created over centuries, we now deal with a society which is fundamentally enraged. People are tired of waiting.
Today is that big day, and many people would say, we've got 67 minutes where we got to honor Madiba. But what is the best way to celebrate his life and times?
Well, for me, each individual has to work that out for themselves. But I would argue that if all of us living here in South Africa could make a commitment to working for that structural change that is necessary for the dream that Madiba had, of a South Africa that would be truly liberated, then I think we'd be contributing something meaningful.
Now, we have a dire situation in South Africa. 63% of almost 4 million of South African children live in poverty. Now, the theme for this year is #Action Against Poverty. How do we maybe look at this and find a lasting solution from the Nelson Mandela Foundation, a lasting solution for poverty?
Well, we've been working with a think tank of universities over the last 3 years, the Mandela Initiative on Poverty and Inequality. There'll be a big conference early next year where all the research and analysis will be pulled together. And then what we're looking to do is to convene a national conversation to identify what it is that we can do differently. Because clearly, it's not sustainable. You can't live in a country where a quarter of your children are stunted because of poverty.
And you can't work in silos either. So are you working with other organizations to make that dream a reality?
Yeah, and part of that work is, we saw the report earlier, with civil society gathering today. We'll be represented there too. That's also the kind of work that we need to be doing.
How hard has it been as the Director of Archives and Dialogue to keep this legacy alive?
Well, at one level, it's surprisingly easy. And that has to do, for me, with the extent to which people still dream But on the other hand, there are the challenges, and we were talking earlier about the tail-off in interest and commitment to the Mandela Day campaign, and I think that is a clear signal that people are questioning fundamentally what Madiba's legacy is and what it means in the world today.
Now, you did indicate earlier that it has to take every South African, every human being really, to look at Madiba's legacy and find that little bit of something that turns them on to portray his life. But if we speak about Nelson Mandela Day today, what would be the best way to look at the current situation in our country and say, this is something that I can do to contribute to his legacy?
Well, I think right at the heart of Madiba's legacy has to be this commitment to liberating oneself.
Yes.
And of course, that's not unique to Madiba. That was the message of Steve Biko and many other leaders in South Africa. I think the message has to be, and it's a message that the Nelson Mandela Foundation certainly is trying to communicate, is that all of us have to take responsibility. There's a lot of finger pointing, and we saw that in the report earlier on. It's very easy to identify who's not doing what they should be doing, but it's time for all of us to say, no, I am implicated as an individual, as a family, as a community, and I want to be part of a solution.
Is it your sense, perhaps, that the Mandela celebrations is a little bit more subdued than previous years?
Certainly that's my perception. And I would argue that it has to do with two things primarily. On the one hand, people are demanding campaigns that actually contribute to meaningful, radical transformation, not to do-gooding. That's not really going to help anything. I think that on the one hand. On the other, I think the privileged in South Africa, the ones who usually go out and paint schools and do what they do, are pretty depressed, given what's gone down in the last 2 years.
Looking at the current political situation in South Africa, would you say that Nelson Mandela would be proud of where we are today?
No, not at all. Well, I think we're seeing a desperate failure of leadership at many levels. It's not only at the top, although, you know, one looks at the top and one remembers that Madiba used to occupy that position. But it's at lower levels. You look at principals of schools who are not doing what they need to be doing, or superintendents of hospitals. And I think that leadership challenge is the biggest one that we're facing right now.
Mr. Harris, I thank you so much for your time and all the best for Nelson Mandela celebrations today. That was the Director of Archive and Dialogue. He's keeping the legacy of Madiba alive at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Vern Harris. So that's why, of course, we're asking you that question. It's a very important question because we have to keep Madiba's legacy alive, and we're asking you the question of the 67 minutes. How are you spending it today on Nelson Mandela International Day? What are you doing? Well, there's a lot of things that you can do. It won't cost you money. Really, I can guarantee you. Look inside and ask yourself, what is there that you can do today to make a difference? We'll take a short break and we'll be taking a look at some of your comments coming through. By the way, are there some comments that we can just take a look at? Let's take a quick look. Yes, ma'am. Let's take a look at some of those comments so Mr. Vern Harris can also see what our people are saying. Jamila van der Skyf says, we should make a change every day. All South Africans must try to find it in their hearts to love one another, irrespective of race. Wonderful one there, Jamila. This one from Martini says, neighborhood cleanup armed with plastic gloves and black bags, only for 67 minutes. There you have it. Martini has given you an idea. Clean your neighborhood, clean your front yard, clean your street. Start with a plastic bag and a pair of gloves. It can help your community. Those are some of your comments. You can keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue, but right now, let's take that break. After the break, we'll be tracking for Madiba. You have to stay tuned. You don't want to miss that one.
Saying that the former minister is now endorsing Ramaphosa as the next president. Campaign time, Prof.
Yeah.
So early.
Let's at least accept that people have a right to expressing themselves in terms of who they support.
But what is lacking very seriously is that there is no that leadership role that is played by the leadership to say, we haven't opened succession and let us deal with those that are campaigning openly, because we haven't opened it as the leadership of the ANC.
What we need in this country is that we need a ruling party or leading party to be able to engage with issues that affect the people.
Our people campaign openly. It weakens the organization. In fact, it makes the policies of the ANC even more popular.
Stay tuned to Media Monitor and catch on analysts unpacking top stories every Sunday from 9 a.m.
"23 climbers are taking part in this year's 6th annual Trek for Mandela. The group will climb the mountain to raise the funds for sanitary towels for schoolgirls. Now, this follows a national call for the provision of free sanitary pads for girls. Now, to talk to us about the Caring for Girls campaign, we're joined here in studio by the CEO of Umbumba Foundation, Richard Mabaso. Mr. Mabaso, very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers.
Now, last year when we talked about this campaign, you know, it looked very promising. Now, tell us about the campaign thus far. How is it going, the campaign for Caring for Girls?
The campaign has been really amazing. We have, you know, reached over 350,000 girls since 2012. And I think this year for us has been even more exciting because we have different partners that have come on board. And if I mention, you know, a few, the likes of Discam Foundation that came through, and just for this year alone, before the climbers left, they had launched a campaign on the 15th of June to collect, they were aiming to collect 10 million pads. And I'm pleased to announce that today, we are over 10 million pads that have been collected. And on top of that, the public has requested, because it was going to be a one-month campaign, 15 June to 15 July, they have requested that, can you please extend to the 31st of July to make sure that we give more. So for us, it's very exciting. Caring for Girls, it's really, really, you know, going up and up.
Absolutely fantastic news. I must congratulate you on the progress thus far. Now, there are calls that were made that sanitary pads should be free for all girls across the country. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, I agree. But look, I always say it has always to be within context, because we've seen in some places where when they're provided for free, because there's no control, you know, they end up not meeting the very same objective. So we need to be very careful that the context of making them free should also mean that there is someone who's overseeing it, there is someone who's controlling the process, there is someone who makes sure that the girls get the education, because it's one thing to provide the pad, but also you need to educate the young girls and the boys about puberty, about menstruation. So it's quite a process. So I see the calls, and we do support them, of course, but we just want to make sure that it must be understood within a certain context.
So how do your process work then when you deliver these pads to the girls? Because you said it goes with education.
So we invite companies, and it's a very simple process. We invite companies to adopt schools, and they support those schools through their CSI budgets, because we want to make sure that it has to be sustainable. So it cannot be a once-off where we just go and distribute pads because it's a certain day of the week or a certain time of the year, and we feel good about it. But we're saying, once we commit to a school, we want to make sure that at least a minimum of 12 months supply per girl must be provisioned. And also making sure that when we go to a school, we don't choose that we've got poor girls in this class or in this, you know, they must stand one side. We go there, we educate all of them about puberty. We then make sure that all of them line up and they get each sanitary pads, and we give them 3 months supply at a time to make sure that they don't go home and then now they've got 12 packets for the whole year, and then they will misuse them. So the process has to be you know, followed, and make sure that once they get the pads, then you can start the monitoring. Are they staying in school? Are they coming in school? Are they not absent? So it's a whole system in place to make sure that when we say hashtag keeping the girl child in school, we mean it. And we need to make sure that there is proof and there is tangible proof that, yes, these girls are staying in school. And ultimately, we can maybe look at, their academic performance, because now that they're at school, they can perform better, they can engage better. And I can give you one example that on the 7th of July, we had our Trek for Mandela send-off dinner in Midrand. And we invited one of the girls, just from Ivory Park Secondary. She came there, and she's just cited a poem. And only to find out that later, this was a girl who was raised by a single parent, and she's doing grade 12. She didn't have money to go to university. She didn't mention all of that, but during her citing of the poem, we were all in tears because she was speaking from the heart, and that platform enabled her to get a bursary.
In 30 seconds, just briefly tell us how's the trekkers doing on the mountain.
Okay, the trekkers, unfortunately, we don't have the final confirmation that they've reached the top, but I can confirm that they are maybe within an hour of the summit. And the good news that maybe you didn't know is that within the trekkers, we had 23 of them, and 4 of the trekkers of them were decided that they want to do a double summit. So a double summit meant that on Sunday, when everyone was having a rest, they continued to base camp. And then last night, they left base camp to Uhuru Peak. And then yesterday morning, they summited and then went back to base camp and then waited for the rest of the group to come. So right now, they are on their way, and they are hoping to summit in the next hour, as I said.
For those that want to participate, trekformandela.co.za.
Trekformandela.com.
Yes. Mr. Mabaso, I thank you so much for your time and joining us. That was the CEO of Mbumba Foundation, Richard Mabaso. But right now, as promised earlier, let's now go live to where civil society leaders is gathering at Rhema Church in Randburg. Let's go live.
Would we be gathered here today to plan how to recapture our democratic state from the hands of rogues and criminals? And I wonder if anyone amongst you remembers the words of Nelson Mandela in his last State of the Nation address in 1999. Just in case you don't, let me remind you what he had to say, and I quote, "Our hope for the future depends on our resolution as a nation in dealing with the scourge of corruption. Success will require an acceptance that in many respects we are a sick society. It's perfectly correct to assert that all this was spawned by apartheid. No amount of self-induced amnesia will change this reality of history. But it is also a reality of the present that among the new cadres in various levels of government, you find individuals who are as corrupt as, if not more than, those that they found in government. When a leader in a provincial legislature siphons off resources meant to fund services to the people, when employees of a government institution set up to help empower those who were excluded by apartheid, defraud it for their own enrichment, then we must admit that we are a sick people, a sick society. This problem manifests itself in all areas of life, he said. More often than not, it is business people who launder funds to curry favor with public servants. It is ordinary citizens who seek to buy themselves out of trouble. It is strange religious leaders who sing praises to criminals or hoard land acquired by the foul means of apartheid. All of us must work together for our redemption." Close quote. 1999, Nelson Mandela. We did not heed these words. And that is why the threat that Mandela saw quite early in our democratic project has culminated in a criminal merchandise that undermines our very sovereignty and the promise of a fair, just, and equitable democratic order. We're here today because we did not listen. And because of that, we are left lamenting, bemoaning, complaining, and even swearing in desperation at what is increasingly perceived as an unstoppable, powerful, and brazen march of the evil force of corruption. Today, we must begin to fundamentally turn the tide against the forces of evil. In the same way that we defeated apartheid through the combined efforts of our people, we must combine our efforts, resources, and energies to maximize our impact and stop state capture. After all, as we will remember, a people united shall never be defeated. Amazingly, here we are, about 400 delegates from around 100 civil society organizations from across the length and breadth of our country, representing millions of people gathered in one room, with one common purpose, to say no to state capture and rewrite the future of South Africa. When approached by both Save South Africa and Kathrada Foundation, you readily agreed and encouraged us to bring everyone together in this fashion. You must know that you were approached because we've been inspired by your fearless voice, your readiness to take risks and fight this ugly specter. You are here as activists and organizers of civil society, the unsung heroes of our struggle who represent the future of South Africa. You represent women, the youth, workers and unemployed, the disabled, business and faith-based organizations, among many others. You represent activist groups that are united behind a range of social issues: education, health, labor rights, social justice, sports, and homelessness. We know that you've done all these things, not because you are seeking martyrdom or heroism, but because you appreciate the call of the moment. We all come from different trenches, but are today seeking unity in a fight against a powerful, vicious, and dangerous enemy that we never confronted before. We dare not underestimate what we are up against. Our campaigns against state capture threaten livelihoods, incomes, and lifestyles of many people, starting with the Zuma and Gupta families, but extending deep down into many aspects of the state. We are threatening the careers and lifestyles of corrupt ministers, public servants, business people, both in state-owned corporations and private sector. We are disrupting ugly networks of international criminal syndicates involved in racketeering, money laundering, and disabling functional states and converting them into agencies in their international criminal enterprise. They are players, powerful players at that, from both the private sector and sometimes governments in places such as China, Dubai, India, Russia, and some African countries, among many others. We're up against a global network of criminals who have turned South Africa into their playground, if you like, an ATM, and who do not like the thought that this is going to come to an end one day. Be under no illusion, they have massive resources, all of it stolen from state and from the poor. They have access to the levers of power. They have their own propaganda television channel, their own black shirts, who threaten our activists and journalists, and their own networks of desperate people who are prepared to do anything to get access to money and power. These are the people that you're confronting. As a result, we're seeing a slide towards low-intensity civil conflict, with assassination of political representatives and very disturbing threats against those who speak out, such as Soli Mapaile and Dr. Makosi Khoza, who is present with us here today. We are seeing the rise of fascist fronts, such as Black First, Land First, and the dirty tricks of Bell Pottinger. To make our tasks even harder, the state capture mafia have destroyed the very aspects of the state that are supposed to protect our freedoms and ensure that we're all safe. The leadership of the police, who are supposed to protect us, have been captured too, leaving us exposed. Crime intelligence is being captured by corrupt elements, and as we already are aware, is slowly being transformed into an apartheid style security police. Even some in the leadership of the National Prosecuting Authority may have been captured, leaving us unable to charge those committing crimes and see them prosecuted. You know, of course, that one of the chairpersons of state-owned enterprises in Popo Molefe is having to take a government institution to court to carry out its responsibility of prosecuting those who have been involved in crime. Indeed, the public protector is a cause for concern and has raised doubt about her competency to carry out the important role assigned to that office. It is, I must admit, a massive battle that we're undertaking. But it is one from which we dare not shy away. There is a lot at stake for the people we are uniting against. We are a direct threat to the state capture project, and we must never underestimate this. The more we take back power, the more we roll back state capture, the more desperate they are going to become. We must remain vigilant. We must remain aware, and we must stand united against these threats. In the face of all this intimidation and thuggery, this struggle has already claimed lives in political violence we're seeing in KZN, Mpumalanga, and other parts of the country. It has also claimed careers, including the SABC 8, who include Suna Venter, may her soul rest in peace, who paid the ultimate price. Praveen Gordon, Mcebisi Jonas, and many others will be mentioned in the course of the proceedings today. You are indeed heroes, our heroes, and we salute you. There are many people who are unhappy about what we're doing here today. They are threatened by the notion of South Africans taking back power that they are guaranteed in the Constitution. They call us many things. They might demean our work and undermine our activities. We must be steadfast and unflinching. They are correct to be unhappy about what we are doing today, but they are completely incorrect if they think we're not going to continue with our agenda. We are a coalition of the committed. We are a coalition of the inspired and a future of South Africa. Comrades, we have one single focus today, one common purpose, and that is to save South Africa and to plan a new way forward. We have to put to an end state capture, and we must do this once and for all, and it is within our means to do so. We have to recapture South Africa, piece by piece, and restore power back to the people. We have to ensure that South Africa we live in is one that was envisioned in our Constitution, which so many people fought, suffered, and died for. We have to return our state into the hands of the people. And once Zuma is gone, we have to ensure that we are led by leaders with integrity, who respect the Constitution and the rule of law. We have to ensure that the state capture project is stopped in its tracks. We must let it be known that it is, with the overwhelming evidence in the public domain, we are absolutely and bitterly disappointed that law enforcement officers and agencies have not acted against the many implicated in criminal acts. We are indeed grateful to the media for the role that they've played in bringing into light the facts about the extent of state capture that Zuma and his criminal gang have tried so hard to hide from the public. We demand the immediate appointment of a judicial commission of inquiry, as recommended by the public protector, as we believe the information that is in the public domain today is only the tip of an iceberg. We must demand the dismissal and jailing of all those found to be involved in these corrupt activities. It is absolutely urgent that the credibility of the criminal justice system and all institutions that are crucial in the fight against corruption is restored. It starts with transparency around the appointment of people to head these institutions. Dave Lewis tells me that in their scrutiny of criteria for appointment of commissioner of police, it is easier to become a commissioner of police than to be a police constable. We have to fight to protect the independence of the judiciary and the integrity of Chapter 9 institutions and guard against the capture of the Independent Electoral Commission, just when we are about to have the most fiercely contested election in 2019. There can be no sustainable economic recovery with an untrustworthy leadership in the Treasury. It's not possible. It is therefore urgent that credible leaders are appointed in key economic institutions, especially those that are linked to the fight against corruption, such as Treasury, SARS, the Chief Procurement Office, the Public Investment Corporation, Financial Intelligence Center, etc., etc. The recapture of the state must include the removal of boards and executives implicated in misgovernance and criminalities in state-owned corporations. We have to insist on a full investigation into corruption in these entities. As part of this, we need proper and transparent processes in the appointment of new leaders in these enterprises. We're also, indeed, we need to push as hard as we can to break the corrupt relationships between business and politician, a terrible nexus, by demanding transparency around party political funding. As part of our insistence that we be led with integrity, we need to discuss how we ensure that all political parties subject their representatives to lifestyle audit as a prerequisite for their nominations to such roles. Many other ideas on what is required to recapture the state are likely to emerge in our discussions. But these are not likely to see the light of day as long as President Zuma, the kingpin of state capture project, remains in power. I will say this, and I say it as I go to sleep every day. It's as if it's my night prayer. Zuma must go. Comrades, today one of the most immediate areas of attention must be how to increase pressure on members of parliament to vote to remove a corrupt president when a motion of no confidence is debated on August the 8th. We must urge them to join the nation against state capture rather than its preservation. A vote against that motion of no confidence can only be a vote to ensure that state capture remains. We must make MPs know that we support them when they vote with their conscience. We must remind our MPs of that Constitutional Court judgment and what it says, that they do not represent the narrow interest of a political party. They represent us, the people of South Africa, and they must vote in the interest of the people. The vote on the 8th of August is about the country and not the party. And we must develop a united set of actions to ensure that MPs know this. We must show them without hesitation what the people of South Africa want and need. We must discuss how we demonstrate our support. A number of petitions have been initiated, marches have been proposed, letters are being written to MPs, among other efforts. What else do we need to do to improve the prospects of success for the motion? We must reflect on this to ensure that maximum impact on the 8th of August is realized. Above and beyond motion of no confidence, we must look at ways to stop state capture and recapture the state. We must focus on the Integrity Six-Pack that has been drafted by the conference organizers, as well as the declaration for the future of South Africa, and ensure it meets the needs of the people. That means keeping our eyes on the longer-term objectives, which are to address the socio-economic issues that divide us, such as poverty, hunger, inequality, racism, patriarchy, sexism, and other forms of discrimination. The boss today says that I'm speaking too much. Okay, let me quickly try and wrap up. And so today you may find yourself alongside someone whose worldview or class orientation is fundamentally different from yours. The person next to you may be a trade unionist from a different federation from yours, or a business person who represents monopoly capital. I didn't talk about the color of monopoly capital. It may be an activist who is campaigning against some of the causes you believe in. It may be someone from a different faith-based group to yours, or somebody with a different ideological orientation. My earnest plea, comrades, is that you put these differences aside today and focus on what our common cause is, because we cannot afford to fail. We have one shot at this, and we must do what we can to make it work. We need to strive for common ground, agree whatever possible on common action, and build day by day on the consensus that we've found. Because as I said earlier, only then can we truly think about shaping a future South Africa. Let me conclude and say many of you have traveled long distances to be here, to make your own contribution to the future of our country. Some of you are dyed-in-wool activists who have trod this path before. Some are political veterans who have seen these kinds of struggles played out before. Some of you were active underground and others above ground formations in the United Democratic Front, and yet many more have experience in mobilizing in the post-apartheid struggles. We are here today not to relaunch a United Democratic Front, but to build a common platform in whatever form it can manifest. I would appeal, therefore, that we do not obsess at this stage about the nature of this front, its name, its issue of logos and colors, etc., etc. We do not have time for that. The shape of whatever coordinating structure may be formed is important, as is the question of representativity. We need all hands on deck, and we need to ensure that women and young people are at the forefront of what we do. But the most important task is to develop a program of action that works, and to ensure that it energizes and involves maximum number of South Africans. We must use the momentum from this conference to set the tone for political and social discourse in each and every community. We must spread the work. Everywhere I go, people want to know what they should do to support these efforts. We must have an answer for them so that we as a nation are all engaged. To draw on the language of the 80s, we must mobilize, not mourn. Each one of us must teach one. And an injury to all is an injury to all. As we do so, we should continually aim to redefine power relations between people and the state, and between the people and political parties. We must build people's power day after day after day. We must ensure that our words and actions redefine South Africa's political agenda, so that by the time our people vote again in 2019, it is our agenda, the people's agenda, that defines political parties, what political parties stand for, they elect as leaders, and how their representatives carry their mandate. We have made many mistakes as a nation since we fought for liberation. We have written a constitution that did not envisage the sort of corrupt leadership we have today. We have entrusted untrustworthy people with power. We have allowed the gains of liberation to be stolen away. Today, we are going to stop that. Working together with a common purpose, we are going to take back power and shape the future of South Africa. We are going to restore power to the people, and in that, comrades, we definitely cannot afford to fail, because a people united can never be defeated. Amandla!
Thank you very much, Comrade Sipho. One day you'll also have a stint in Parliament. I was telling him how politicians are able to get around time. I'm sure.
Well, there you have it. That's the gathering at Rhema Church. We'll go back there a little bit later for the panel discussion. But, of course, we have a special day today. Nelson Mandela Day. International Nelson Mandela Day, I might add. But it's now time for our special focus on the life of Nelson Mandela, ahead of what will no doubt be a very busy day filled with various activities to celebrate his birthday today. And we start off in New York, where Nelson Mandela's values of building a future where everyone can live in peace, prosperity and harmony with nature remain principles central to what drives the United Nations today. But also remember that we're asking you that question. It's a very important question. It's what you are doing today for your 67 days for Nelson Mandela today. There is the question. How will you be spending your 67 minutes today? We'll take a look at some of those comments that you've been sending us the entire morning, and we'll read them as we continue, but we'll take a short break and we'll be right back after that.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the advice of our elders? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Well, a very good morning and welcome to AM News Live at 10:00 hours across all Central Africa regions.
A fitting send-off for a revolutionary giant, a life dedicated in service of the people.
The result means that the Swallows are out of the ABC Multiple League and drop to the amateur fourth tier of South African football, the SAB League.
Tune in on AM News every Saturday and Sunday from 10 hours.
Now, welcome back. Nelson Mandela once said, and I'll quote, "There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children." Close quote. Now, sadly, a report by the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, together with Deloitte and Touche, Deloitte and Girls and Boys Town, by the way. The report is titled "The State of the South African Child" report shows that a majority of the country's children are highly vulnerable to poverty, violent crimes, and lack of access to basic services. The employment prospects are also compromised by having few opportunities, compounded by a school system that is rated among the lowest in quality globally, with a high dropout rate. Now, to talk to us about the report, we are joined in studio by the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, Sibongile Mkabela. Very good morning to you. Harsha Desai, the management consultant from Deloitte. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
As well as Margaret Balaji, the head of training and education for boys and girls at Boys Town. A very good morning to you. I normally say Boys Town because I remember Boys Town. When did Girls Town came along?
In 2004.
Okay, that's why I can't remember that far back.
It's now girls before boys.
Oh, Girls and Boys Town.
Yes.
All right. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I first want to talk about the research and the report. What does the report say about the state of our children in our country? Let's start off with you, Nadia.
Thank you very much, Alvis. I think the report
tries to pull together various different issues facing children. It was done as part of the development for the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund strategy. And what we wanted to look at is what are the big issues affecting children. And based on the way we do report on children, we find that there's some information from Stats SA, some information from the Child Gauge, from the Department of Social Development, Department of Health, Justice. There's so many different parties involved in this process. And what we wanted to do is paint a holistic picture of where are children vulnerable and how does the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, together with all the other social partners, play a role in addressing these needs. The report paints a little bit of a sad picture around the situation and the housing in which our children live. At least 42% of children between the ages of 0 and 5 live in informal housing. And there's a lot of challenges associated with living in overcrowded housing that then creates for us. We have improved in terms of the poverty rate for children. I think it's dropped about 15 to 20%, but that's not enough. We're still sitting at around 53% poverty rate for children. So we really know we need to do more. And a lot of our issues are perpetuated as a result of that poverty issue. We also find that crimes against children are also are becoming quite prevalent. We found that 52% of those crimes actually are sexually related, and it's not just males and it's not just females, and it's happening to our children both in their homes, it's happening to children in schools, it's happening to children in various vulnerable situations. And I think what's very exciting is that the work that the Children's Fund, together with Girls and Boys Town, is doing is helping to focus on how do we start getting into the ecosystem, bringing stakeholders together, and really creating a safe community and a safe space for children.
Sibongile, from your perspective as the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, what stood out for you from this report?
Wow, a number of things stood out. It's the extent of vulnerability of children. Is the fact that South Africa still has child marriages. We still marry off 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds, despite what policy says. And what stood out, I think, is the distance between reality on the ground and policy. So if you're to look at South Africa purely from a policy perspective, everything you can cross every line. We've got it. But if you're looking at South Africa from the experiences of a 13-year-old in rural Qunu village where Madiba comes from, you will find a different picture. All the what we've signed off, we have signed off the African Charter for the Protection of Children. We've signed off the United Nations Charter for the Protection of Children. So we've signed all the important documents that if we then implemented, our children would be in the safest place. And other thing that really stood up and scared me was the stats around competences of children. That over the last 20 years, our children have been getting less and less able. So if we looked at competences, Hasha, we looked at competences of a 17-year-old in 1994 compared to 2004, compared to 2014. And for African children and colored children in particular, that was a decline, which is abnormal in any society. But for white children and Indian children, there would be the normal going up. So, in a progression.
And when we talk about competencies, what are we talking about?
We're talking about their maths levels and maths and English and science levels. And that becomes a big problem for us because it talks about the ability to then enter the workforce, the ability to then be part of a contributing member of society. And I think our biggest challenge at the moment, given our 26% unemployment rate, is how do we make sure that our youth become contributing members? And it doesn't mean a fancy office job. It means having a dignified living wage that allows you to do what you need to do to take care of yourself, take care of your family and your loved ones. And I think that's something that we are losing. And I think recently I had the privilege of joining the Girls Symposium that was being hosted. And I think what I'm a little passionate about, or becoming more and more passionate about, is our young people advocating for themselves. And Bongi feels that shouldn't be the case. Children shouldn't be speaking out. But when we start having a conversation about a 30% pass rate, we are moving backwards.
I'm going to come back to the competencies and, of course, the contributing factors thereof. But from your perspective, Margaret, looking after boys and girls and making sure that they are comfortable, from the report, what worries you?
There are so many things that worries us, especially as girls in Boys Town. We are worried that our children aren't safe. We are worried that our children aren't protected within the communities. So as Girls and Boys Town, as a home that is looking after children, we felt there's a need to send a message out there to make sure that our children are safe, to make sure that the caregivers, the parents, the teachers are aware of the dangers that are facing our children out there. They are aware of the vulnerability of our children. So that is the message that we're sending out there as Girls and Boys Town, that we need to protect our children.
Margaret, from your perspective, why should government pay attention to reports like this and pay critical attention to them, especially when it relates to children?
Well,
sorry.
That's okay.
That's for Sibongile.
You know, the reality is, if you're looking at it from a very broad perspective, which governments should, our greatest asset are our young people. We are a young country. So in fact, all our policies should be child and youth biased if we are to survive as a nation. So it's not about the child alone, it's about our survival as a nation. Now, if you're looking at competencies of 17-year-olds declining, it means you have absolutely no human capital, or you have less human capital than you would want to have. So just from the broad political, strategic leadership perspective, children and young people, we have no choice but to invest in them. If you look at societies that are aging societies, you will find policies that are in favor of that population. Now, probably because we are colonized by people whose societies are aging, we adopted policies that look after older people and middle-aged people more than it looks after young people and children. And Africa is different. The majority of our population is young people and children, so they should care. Secondly, we have a responsibility of care. Thirdly, we have committed ourselves, in all the documents we have signed, we have committed ourselves to protecting, not only protecting, but ensuring that they develop and they thrive. And if we satisfy those, we are okay as a nation.
South Africa, more than 63%, or almost 4 million children live in poverty. Now, bearing in mind the Nelson Mandela Day celebrations today, and of course the theme for the celebrations, hashtag Action Against Poverty for this year, what does the report suggest should be done about this?
I think what the report is suggesting, and I think it's a call that a lot of the social partners have aligned to, and government as well, to a large extent, in business, is that these problems are not nuclear and they're not insular. And one of the things we need to do, if we want to talk about teenage pregnancy, we need to understand that teenage pregnancy is not just about sexual protection. It's about the education of that girl. It's about how do we look after her child after her child is delivered. It's about how her family gives her the support system that allows her to succeed and thrive even after she has delivered her child. It's also understanding that when that child is unwanted, is the system working to take care of that child? Is our justice system working to allow us to report on the need, to allow children to access the needs that they have of the justice system? And I think we've got a big issue when it comes to our justice system being able to actually persecute people that offended children. And it's sometimes it's serious crimes, like all of the crimes are serious against children, actually. I wouldn't say, I can't, so, you know, it's crimes like physical assault that might happen, child against child. That for me was a big painful issue around the report. And what are we doing? How do we change that mentality? Are we bringing up, I'm sorry to say, maybe hooligans? How do we change that behavior? And we need to do something now. Otherwise, we're just going to be creating a society that has no respect for one another. So our big call for this report is really, how do we bring people together to actually demonstrate actionable change? And I think that's what this partnership has started.
Now, Sibongile, from your perspective as the Nelson Mandela Foundation Children's Fund, this is a very important day for you, but how do you benefit from it?
How we benefit from it? One is focus. It's the country to stop and focus, not on Mandela's values. And of course, I love the quote you mentioned at the beginning. One of his biggest passions were children.
Yes.
And it wasn't just as a man, yes, but as a leader, as a strategic person, he understood that South Africa's success relied on the children and young people and how we look after them. So we benefit in that way, but I think we also benefit because we have a poverty perspective. So it's good that this year we're focusing on poverty. In everything we do as the Children's Fund, and when you understand the Children's Fund, we are not a single organization. We are really a convening platform of a number of organizations all over the country. We touch every part of South Africa. We work in deep rural areas. I usually say the Children's Fund is always in the trenches because that's where we work. And my team doesn't spend time in the Johannesburg offices. We spend time in deep rural areas dealing with very difficult problems. But in everything we do, we bring in what we call sustainable livelihood. Whether it's, Mama, there's a little tire, a car tire, we can plant a garden here. We can get some vegetables going. Because there are things we need to get going, because the issue of nutrition came up as huge in the report, the levels of nutrition and stunting. And if we've got stunting and issues of nutrition at that early age, the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter what we invest later on. Yes. We've lost the opportunity. So as the Children's Fund, with all our partners who work in very difficult, work in schools, work in Girls and Boys Town, the Children's Fund is really a collection of organizations and people and grassroots organizations and so on. But I'd like to say, for this day, as we look at poverty, if every family can just make sure that it can sustain itself on the food it produces for itself.
Margaret, do you benefit from the fund or maybe from government in that respect? And how do you choose your beneficiaries that come to Girls and Boys Town?
Oh, well, government do support us and in their own way. But obviously, at the moment, we're working with Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. I'm not sure if you talk about benefit in which sense.
How do you choose the beneficiary, the people that goes to the Girls and Boys Town? How do you choose them?
Oh, all right. Okay, through the report that was done by Deloitte, I mean, we had a community that was is still really poverty-stricken. And that community needed our most services. It's like, from the report, we could relate to that particular community to say, this is the community that we're going to choose because of 1, 2, 3. I mean, there's high levels of drug usage. There's high levels of teenage pregnancy. There's high level of unemployment. I mean, you should go inside that community. It will break your heart to see what's happening within the community, the high usage of drugs. So all of these things demands us or requires us as an organization to take a stance and say, what can we do? Can we just look at it, or can we just take an action? Of which, as Girls and Boys Town, we did take an action to go right inside the community, to meet with the community stakeholders, to meet with the school, to meet with various mentors of young people, to meet with parents, to actually share with them, the common ground of what can be done. Because if we don't educate our parents, if we don't educate our young people, with the problems that we have, they were still going to continue. Yes. So that is why, as Girls and Boys Town, we gain much joy in going into the community and working with the community and equipping the community so that tomorrow they can have knowledge to stand for themselves.
Harsha, I still wanted to delve into the contributing factors of the incompetencies that our children currently have, but unfortunately we run out of time. I just would like to get a closing statement for all three of you. Nelson Mandela Day today, what can we do as a society to make sure that our children do not suffer?
I think for me, one of the big issues we need to start, it's not an issue. We as individuals living in South Africa need to take responsibility. Don't ignore a bad situation when you see it. Your child as my child. And I would like to have more men as role models for our children. I think we are losing out in society. How can we as individuals be role models and create the support structures in our daily lives with the community around we live? I'm not saying, you need to go to a special place to give a special home, the needs that they have, etc. But in your own community, don't ignore the plight of our children, because by ignoring them, we are perpetuating the situation.
It starts with you.
Yeah.
It starts with you.
I think this collaboration is very important. Deloitte as a business helped us with our data. That data helped us plot our programming for children. And Girls and Boys Town many of their activities being on the ground helps us to reach the child. So we can reach the child, and we can use our collective strength. And I think that's one of the, values of Madiba is collaboration, is seeing strength and synergies amongst institutions that would ordinarily not be seen as collectively can contribute to something.
I think, this day gives us an opportunity as the nation, as organizations, to do our bit and do our bit in a big way. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a small thing that you do to a neighbor. It can be a small thing that you do to your home, elderly homes or creches or anything. But do it in a big way. Because if Tata was here, he would definitely do something big, for the children, for the elderly, and for the country.
Now, that's why we're asking that question to our viewers today. We're asking them, what are they going to do for their 67 minutes for Tata Madiba? Let's take a look at what you are telling us on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page in relation to the question. You remember the question that we posed to you? 67 minutes, that's what you have today. Are you going to spend it? Are you going to spend it wisely for us? Let's take a look at your comments coming through. Let's take a look. Is it there? Yes, this one from Lisha says, Mandela Day, blood donation at South African Blood Bank, East London, and obviously buying someone needy a lunch. Now, that is absolutely wonderful, isn't it? Lachasa says, I will be assisting Ward 1 community with some advice, open a case against ward councillors for denying the community access to it. Well, that's assisting your community. Somebody earlier said, just take a black bag and some gloves and clean up your street and your community. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining me. That was the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, Sibongile Mkabela. It's also Harsha Desai, the management consultant from Deloitte, and Margaret Balaji, the head of training and education for boys and girls here in our studio. Thank you so much once again. But right now, we go live to the event taking place at the Rhema Church in Randburg, where civil society is meeting. Let's go there now.
To know all of them. It's a pleasure to have you with us. You saw the names of many people who have spoken out, but we're privileged today to have three people who represent very different experiences, but nevertheless extraordinary experiences in the last while. I was thinking as I came in that, in fact, we can acknowledge these and other heroes now publicly because we are a democracy, because we can speak out, and because we can recognize their courage in taking the stand that they have. So I'd like to start by asking you to please warmly welcome them. I'm going to start immediately on my right with Mr. Popo Molefe. Of course, some of you younger may not know all of his background, and I'm not going to go through it now, other than to say he was one of the stalwarts in the UDF, was Premier of Northwest Province, and at the moment is still, for a few more days, the chairman of PRASA. PRASA has occupied the news in many different ways, and he has played a critical role as chairman of fighting against the actions that were taken and ensuring that the correct legal process, which he's still pursuing, is fulfilled. So I'm going to give the floor to each of them to tell their story for a few minutes. We've got about 40 minutes or so. So maybe 10 minutes per person, and just to share what they would like to about how they've got to this point and where things are. Popo.
Thank you. Is it okay? It's not working. Thank you very much, Professor Nick Beneda. It's good to be with you again. Nick, when I was sitting down there, I almost walked out of this room, because I thought I was being attacked, told that I bought very tall trains that were involved in graft to finance political parties and so on. But I was persuaded by my comrade to stay. Now, thank you very much, comrades Auta and then the Save South Africa and the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, for inviting us. It's the first time that people call me a hero. I'm not used to that. We have been called fakes of stalwarts and veterans. People call us fakes. Let me briefly talk about PRASA. It's important that we understand the importance of an organization called PRASA. It's an organization whose mandate is to provide essential commuter transportation for millions of South African workers and people traveling long distances to the rural areas. Equally, to provide bus service in a similar manner. It is an organization that has been allocated a budget of 172 billion rand over 20 years. If I mention this number, you'd understand why there is so much struggle to control, to get into PRASA and to control it. It is a very critical organization in terms of driving the process of industrialization, economic growth, economic development, investment as a key state entity that would then create traction for other private companies to come into this country and invest. It is critical for the creation of small businesses in this country through supplier components, etc. Because in discharging the program of modernization of PRASA, which is what it is busy with now, to modernize commuter rail transportation by getting state-of-the-art trains, investing extensively in modern signaling infrastructure to ensure that there is proper communication between the trains, train controllers, as well as the centers, various centers of communication. And we've got three big ones in this connection. There's one led by a company called Siemens. We call it the Gauteng Nav Center, and it is in Kaalfontein. That project has been completed. There's one that is run by Bombardier with their black partners in KwaZulu-Natal. The third one, and please don't talk about the arms deal. The third one is run by a new company called, another company called Thales Mazia. It's a rollout of infrastructure in preparation for the new trains. And PRASA has begun procuring 600 new trains. 20 of them comes from Brazil, and 600 of them would be manufactured here in South Africa because we believe we have to create jobs here. We've got to make sure that we use that factory to create economies of scale, ensuring that through the localization system, that the components for the trains and everything that you do could be supplied by local companies. And that factory is being built in Niger. There's a lot of progress achieved so far in respect of that program. The 18 of the first 20 trains have already arrived in South Africa. You would have seen the president launching them recently. Of course, the new minister decided that I should not be there as the chairman of PRASA. He wanted the glory for himself, not for the board of PRASA. So that's the job we're doing. Now, as part of the modernization program, PRASA went out to procure, initially they wanted to procure 88 locomotives. The diesel ones, as well as the hybrids, to pull the existing trains, which are already very old, and we have to continue maintaining them. A tender went out with very clear specs. The response was given to that tender using a model called Euro 3000, which was complying in all respects with the commuter rail network system of Transnet as well as the rail safety regulator requirements. The company that submitted, there were a number of companies that submitted, including bids, including General Electric and so on. But one of them was an unknown entity called Sifambo. Sifambo means transport. I'm sure Prince Marshall would know it better. This company had never been in any rail business at all. It was required to demonstrate experience in that regard, skills, financial capacity to carry out a program of that project of that magnitude. It was bought as a shelf company, and it became a financial services, and it found its way into being the winner of the bid of PRASA. No engineering capacity. It didn't even have a contract with a subcontractor. When finally, and by the way, the tender required that it be a lease of these trains. But when they submitted their bid, they also submitted the bid to sell the locomotives, not trains, locomotives, to PRASA. The supplier of these locomotives is a company called Voslo, based in Spain. It became a partner with Sifambo, but the contract was only signed after Sifambo was allocated the contract. The subcontracting arrangement between the two was only after the contract was submitted, was signed with Sifambo. Sifambo was also required to provide a performance bond of 10% of the cost of the locomotives. When the purchase occurred, Voslo told PRASA, look, you actually don't need Euro 3000. We can give you something better. Buy Euro 4000, which then was christened to Afro 4000. This is where the problem started, because Euro 4000 was very tall. It didn't comply with the specs of safety here in South Africa and proper spec with regard to rail network. But they went ahead and bought it. By that time, what started as a requirement of 88 locomotives had gone down to 70 locomotives because they had not factored in the impact of foreign currency exchange. They tried to cover up for that, and of course the amount was 3.5 billion rand. But with the escalation of the euro against the rand, by the time we decided to stop it, it was already sitting at about 5 billion rather. It was already sitting at 5 billion for the country. That's one aspect of it. But there was another company, I'm going to come back to these matters, another company called Siangena. I'm still surprised that it doesn't feature as part of the state capture, because that company's bosses have captured literally a significant portion of the management of PRASA, and they get any contract they want. They did what they called speed gates, monitors and cameras, and they were supposed to do automated ticketing system to facilitate speedy movement of people at the stations and revenue collection for the company. And that contract started off as a contract of 1.9 billion rand. It was speedily done just before the 2010 World Cup because they said, well, we need this quickly. The world is coming here. We must do it quickly. And it was for a few stations. After that, without proper procurement process, they then extended it by another 2 billion rand, and it went to 4 billion. So you already deal between the two with 7.5 billion rands, with the escalations, of course, that are attendant to that. It would be anything that only the future would have known. I was appointed to PRASA on the 1st of August 2014. I was asked by the Minister, Dipuo Peters, if I would be willing to be the chairman, and I said, well, if you ask me and your cabinet agrees, it's okay. I did not have a mandate that said, when you find corruption there, don't fight it. And when we instruct you to allow for money of the state entity to be channeled to certain individuals, please agree. I was not given that mandate because I would not have accepted that appointment. So when I got in there, I started realizing that things were not going well. I thought the CEO had just enormous powers. And I said to him, you are a nice young man, very intelligent, but I think you make many mistakes. And it is so because you seem to have worked with people who never showed you your errors when you committed errors. I want you and I to work differently now going forward. I don't want to dig into the past. I want us to work differently. I did not know about all these problems of the Swifambo and the train, the signaling systems, the speed gates and so on. I didn't know anything. Then one evening in November, I see on TV that the public protector is making a statement that she's investigating PRASA. We had never been told by anybody. I then demanded to see the interim report of the public protector. I could not get it until only in March 2015. In July of the same year, the Auditor General also released a damning report on the organization about a whole range of things, including the locomotives. We decided to cooperate with the public protector to make sure that further investigation take place into this organization. And when they derailed, a report came out of the public protector on the 15th of August, 2015. We immediately said we're going to cooperate. We're going to implement the remedial actions recommended by the public protector. We didn't do what you did in Parliament about Mkandla. Is he saying I'm too long?
But he's saying it very nicely. So 2 more minutes.
So that's the picture, but there are many more things I would have said. I wish we don't have it. But the long and short of it, we understood our mandate to being that one of protecting the interests of the commuters whose purpose we're supposed to serve and protect the taxpayers' money. And that's why we went ahead with these investigations. Throughout, we were harassed by members of parliament about the investigations. They said, no, why do you do it? Why don't you leave it to the special investigating unit, a captured entity? Why don't you use other things? Why do you appoint a private company to investigate? So we're harassed throughout. We're told that we are spending too much time and too much money. As you recall, the minister at one point said we must stop it, and I refused. I said it's not going to stop, because we've got fiduciary duties as well to make sure that we protect the interests of the company and the interests of the taxpayer. We are at the point at which now we have two major cases in court. Well, one has already been won, is one of the locomotives. That contract has been cancelled, but by the time it got cancelled, already 2.6 billion rand had been paid. We have sent letter of demand to Sifambo. Sifambo is saying it doesn't have money, it's liquidating itself. But we know Sifambo was set up as a front for the Spanish, so we'll get our money from the Spanish. They will have to pay. The Siangena matter, there have been lots of interference with that as well. The judge gave a ruling in terms of the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, which requires that you launch your complaint within 180 days after the contract was signed. I could not have done so because I was not there when the contract was signed. By the time we got the facts, the 180 days had already passed, which means, therefore, that if we follow that route, thieves can steal. If they are able to hide for 180 days, nothing should happen to them. So we are appealing that judgment. He dismissed our appeal, but we are now petitioning the High Court, the Court of Appeal, to reverse his judgment. So that's where we are at the moment with regard to PRASA. But we placed before the law enforcement agencies about 41 complaints. We gave to them forensic capacity to make sure that they can analyze movements of funds, analyze the Section 205 subpoenas, which allow them to go into the accounts of every one of those companies and the individuals. They've done nothing about it. That is why you hear today that I need the court now to force them. They must explain to the courts and the South African public why, as a state organ, they are refusing to discharge their mandate. Where are we? They said they're going to oppose our application. Now, we have been having a huge battle. The new minister has come. When they failed to remove us, as you know, they tried to remove us and went to court to set aside the decision of the minister. They adopted a new tactic to isolate me because I'm a problem. I'm the problem. They called directors, some directors one by one to say, please resign so that this guy remains alone. And when he's alone, there'll be no board, he will not be able to make decisions. Now we are at a point at which there's 4 of us who are independent directors. There's supposed to be a nominee of National Treasury and a nominee of the Department of Transport. The ministries have held those individuals back so that the board, which requires 6 persons to curate, does not have a quorum. So that's where we are. Yeah, but I think it's important part. Very important. One moment. Now, I see Minister Malusi Gigaba speaking at Stock Exchange saying, I want effective and efficient state entities, I want good corporate governance. He is withholding a nominee who should be on the board of PRASA to do his work at a critical time when that board is supposed to finalize the annual audit. It can't, because it is not a correct board. It doesn't have a quorum. It can't complete its work. Now, last week, what do we get? The state attorney comes and he says, no, we will not file our papers to oppose you because it has come to our attention that that board does not have a quorum. So the chairman of the board does not have the authority to compel us to investigate the matters that he placed before us. This is what the state capture does to this country. Everybody is quiet. I've written to the president of this country. I've written to the minister, 2 ministers of transport. I've written to National Treasury. I've written to the Auditor General to say, we've got a legal duty to discharge our mandate as a board of directors. Please appoint the 2 directors to this board so that we can do our job. because he's using the excuse that the rest he needs to advertise, it's going to take a long time, it has to go to the cabinet must approve. So, in effect, therefore, there is a collusion between the executive authority and those who are stealing from the taxpayer and the organs of state, that we should fail in discharging our fiduciary duties. So that's where we are. And I think it is proper, therefore, that all of us fight to the hilt to end this corruption.
Thank you. Thank you, Papa. Thank you. Can you pass it to Pete? I'm going to give the chicken. Pete's okay. I know we could take a lot of time to hear, but we are short of time. I'm going to ask Pete Richer, who I'm sure many of you know, spent many years at SARS and elsewhere, has played an important part. And Peter, please tell us briefly your view on this and your story.
Okay, I think it's too long a story to tell the whole history of the Rogue Unit. If you do want to know it, read the book. But I think the key thing is that what we set out to do within the investigative capabilities and within the auditing capabilities of SARS was to increasingly spread the tentacles of our ability to avoid or to overcome tax evasion. I'm not sure everybody quite realizes just how central SARS is to the very nature of a democratic state. That without an effective tax collection mechanism, any form of social redistribution becomes extremely difficult. It is one of the central pillars of overcoming poverty in this country. And what we tried to do was to expand and become more effective. It seems, and at the time we didn't know what was going on, but it seems that we obviously began to step on more and more toes as we became more effective. One of the things that we did under Ministers Gordon and Jonas was that we put out a program saying, this is what we see as the priorities that we need to tackle as far as tax evasion. And one of them was the tobacco industry. More or less from that time, we began to hit bigger and bigger problems. We couldn't put all the dots together, and I think it was only after the attacks on Ministers Gordon and Jonas that the dots began to line up. But at the time, the key antagonist was the tobacco industry as a whole. So we had been steered in some ways towards looking at small-scale smugglers, that sort of thing. When we began to look at large-scale evasion of excise duties and so on by the tobacco industry, we began to get these stories appearing in the newspaper that we had set up a unit that ran brothels and various other things. A complete fantasy was created around the so-called rogue unit. And that was used as the pretext to essentially chop off most of the leadership of SARS. But in that, I think what comes out in that, and it's the 2 points I would just like to make, is that when we talk about state capture, first, not all public servants are captured. You'll probably find that the vast majority of public servants are actually trying to do a decent job. And many of them are scared, and I think what is critical is that we encourage increasing whistleblowing by public servants about the state capture, and that we support those who whistleblow. Don't be distracted by smear tactics that will try to smear the whistleblowers. That's exactly what happened in our case. There was an attempt to create a complete fantasy, which one of our major newspapers, which seems to have also been captured at the time, bought into. And they ran for months this increasingly salacious stories about this so-called unit, and thus any attempt by us to defend ourselves was neutralized. So, not all public servants are captured. And those, we need to encourage them to whistleblow, and we need to defend those who whistleblow. The second thing is that state capture is not just the Guptas. As we saw, the tobacco industry, for example, and it's just an example, has over decades made inroads into our state. And the Guptas are only a small piece of that picture. So we mustn't think that dealing with the Guptas alone is going to end the story of state capture. We need to deal with state capture in its totality, not just single parts of it. I think also it's a little embarrassing to be called heroes in this context. The reality is that the bulk of public servants want to do the right thing. Doing the right thing is following the law. The state administration is run by precepts of law. It's a rule book. You just follow it. And that's where most public servants want to go down. It's a much clearer path. But the pressures, particularly if key parts of the management teams are captured, the pressures on public servants in the next layer or the next layer are extremely intense. They need to be supported, and they need to be supported through knowing that if they do their jobs properly, they will be defended. I think that's the key. Because if you just look at the list that was read out earlier, you can go across almost every state institution now and look at how many public servants have, on various pretexts, been axed. Some of them have had to fight long and lengthy legal battles. Adrian, who was supposed to speak here rather than me, has been, for more than a year and a half now, I think it is, been on and off in the CCMA and so on, simply trying to defend his reputation. This is what honest public servants are up against, and it requires, I think, a very broad support base to defend the honest public servant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pete. So I suppose the word that you're resisting is one that has come about because you've followed the rules and because you've insisted. And I think we and many South Africans are honoring your integrity for having the courage to keep doing what you're doing. Dr. Mkhosi Khoza is an MP, as you will know. She has had a long history in government and as an activist, and recently has come into the limelight for a variety of things. We'd like to hear a bit about your thoughts.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me appreciate this opportunity. I know that most of you may be wondering what is a member of parliament, specifically a member of the ruling party, the African National Congress, doing in this gathering to map South Africa's future. Some of you may even be asking yourself, how could she associate herself with such a gathering when by virtue of being a member of the ruling party, she has been part of defeating the 7 motions of the vote of no confidence against President Zuma, tabled by opposition parties in Parliament. I've been associated with the African National Congress since I was 12 years old. I was taught to respect leadership directives. I was also socialized to view anything that comes from one's opponents with suspicion. During the liberation struggle, the only system that made sense to us as the oppressed, exploited, disenfranchised, and marginalized social and economic groups was communism. It is therefore not surprising that we embraced and adopted the concept of democratic centralism, which is essentially Leninist organizational system in which decisions taken by a democratically elected structure are binding to all members. However, the dilemma I had is this: what if such directives are morally bankrupt? What if such directives are directionless? What if such directives reflect arrogance, dishonesty, denialism, and injudiciousness of that very democratically elected leadership collective? What if such directives betray the organizational mission of People's Parliament? What if that very directive of leadership collective is at war with its own organizational moral conscience, the ANC constitution, let alone the country's constitution, which is the supreme law of the land? If I may quote the preamble of the ANC constitution as amended in 2012 and has not yet been amended, it reads, "The African National Congress has emerged to lead the struggle of all democratic and patriotic forces to destroy apartheid state and replace it with a united, non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic South Africa in which the people as a whole shall govern." The African National Congress has come to be recognized as the central organizer and inspirer of a vast popular upsurge against apartheid, involving a great array of social, cultural, religious, trade unions, professional, and political organizations. Close quote. Fellow South Africans, what I witnessed on the 7th April 2017 is inconsistent with these provisions of the very African National Congress Constitution. It is still in effect to this day, as it was last amended in 2012. When joining the African National Congress, in terms of Rule 4.17, I committed myself to the following, open quote, "I am joining the African National Congress voluntarily and without motives of material advantage or personal gain," close quote. I am still upholding this commitment. Can this be the same with my leadership collective, specifically my president? I also committed to place my energies and skills at the disposal of the organization and carry out tasks given to me that I will work towards making the ANC an even effective instrument of liberation in the hands of the people, close quote. This explains why I am here today. I am here because South Africans, the people, are speaking, and I have to listen attentively so that my ANC could be an effective instrument of liberation. Can the ANC be an effective instrument of non-racialism when it is led by a president who has lost legitimacy, credibility, integrity, and honorableness? I am here to defend the ANC mission and not a dishonorable and disgraceful leader. I am here I am here because, as an African feminist, grounded in Ubuntu philosophy, I find a patriarchal system oppressive. I also find being led by a man who harvests women extremely intolerable. I have been living with this pain for so long. He promised to stay for one term, but he never did. To know that it is not my pain, but the pain of all South Africans, it made me to stand up and speak out. This is a president who appears to promote tribalism. Not only are we divided along racial lines, because our president, when his citizens peacefully marched to plead with him to step down in order to give South Africa a breathing space, so that we may implement the National Development Plan and root out corruption, state capture, that Mr. President has institutionalized. He calls them racist and agents of white monopoly capital. This is a president when black intellectuals express their views, he does not agree with them. He sarcastically labels them clever blacks. I'm a black. I am clever, I am smart, I am educated, and therefore there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. This is a president who has made us feel awkward for being black and smart. This is a president who seems to yearn to be a king, hence his Kandla royal state. In case I do not make it on the 8th August 2017, Mr. President, that you know as the president, you are haunting the South African nation. Please, Mr. President, step down and respect those who elected you. Mr. President, 11 million South Africans voted for you, Mr. President, and not just 1 million ANC members. You may wish to contest the ANC presidency in December 2017, but South Africa no longer needs you, Mr. President. Please save South Africa. Save jobs, Mr. President. Save the economy, Mr. President. Save women, Mr. President. Save South Africans from this pain. I have witnessed that violence against women has reached intolerable levels. The vision and mission statement of the ANC Parliamentary Caucus, which is based on the fact that we are a united South Africa and we are a parliament of the people, has been violated by you, Mr. President. I cannot say more about how much you have violated the country's constitution. Mr. President, uphold the ANC constitution. Mr. President, uphold the country's constitution. Step aside and let moral and ethical leaders lead this country to a prosperous path. Thank you.
Yeah, we go. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you. Well done, fantastic. Under your blood and life.
Amandla. Amandla. Thank you very much, Comrade Nick, Dr. Koza, Mr. Rich, and Dr. Popo Molefe for educating us, getting to understand what's happening. So we are going to move very fast and tighten up quite a number of things. The one appeal that I have is that we appeal that people must stay right through, because firstly, we would want at the end to get every organization that is here to come on stage and take a picture. But what is important also is that we must be part of the resolutions and the declarations that are coming out of this meeting. So this one is going to be difficult, but yet easy. And that's basically the different sectors. I saw not Neil Coleman, an old friend of mine, his younger brother. Not Keith Coleman. There are a lot of, where is Coleman? I saw Colin Coleman, yeah, I saw somewhere. Thank you very much. So can I call on stage? So it's just 3 minutes each. And the basic question that has to be asked is what should be done to act against state capture? And also, what is it that you intend doing as a sector? But I will start off by calling Pastor Ray Macaulay, who will speak also on behalf of the NRLC.
Well, there you have it, the 90 civil society organizations meeting at Rema to discuss the issue of state capture. Well, right now it's time for our special focus on the life of Nelson Mandela. I've had what will be, no doubt, be a very busy day filled with various activities to celebrate his birthday today. Let's go to New York, where Nelson Mandela's values of building a future where everyone can live in peace, prosperity, and in harmony with nature remain a principle central to what drives the United Nations every day. That's the word from senior officials at the global organization when Nelson Mandela International Day was birthed in the General Assembly almost 8 years ago. Hollywood star and UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador Danny Glover will headline the official commemoration in New York today.
Madiba, I love you so much. The greatest president of the world.
While it was the General Assembly at the UN that declared Nelson Mandela Day in November 2009, it was this concert, featuring some of the biggest names in music a few months earlier, that created all the buzz. The first UN Day named after an individual that is growing in popularity around the world.
We see increased interest from our colleagues in the field and also here at headquarters of doing something on Nelson Mandela Day to actually represent the spirit and the meaning of what that day was about, public service and supporting the values that Nelson Mandela embraced.
In partnership with the City of New York, the General Assembly will host the official commemoration with actor and activist Danny Glover as the keynote speaker. Officials and diplomats will later in the day head to Randall's Island, just north of Manhattan where we are, to clean the shoreline and work on an urban farm. And in a world of turmoil and suffering, a rapidly changing climate, and a development agenda vast and growing, Madiba's values have never been more relevant.
Change can also start with us. Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for 27 years, and when he came out, instead of being bitter and angry, he actually spoke about collaboration and openness and reaching out. And he embodies a vision that wants to build a future that is based on collaboration that supports what the United Nations supports.
Previous commemorations have featured old friends with words worth remembering.
First, you can't free anybody else, and you can't serve anybody else unless first you free yourself from bitterness and hatred and resentment and the paralysis they bring. Mandela walked out of prison after 27 years a greater man than he went in.
the United Nations has played its part in liberating the people of South Africa. Now you play an even more important role of keeping alive the values that Madiba has given us.
The UN just days ago launching the FAIR's Plan of Action with the world's religious leaders, an initiative to curb atrocities around the globe.
Mandela, thanks to his wisdom, thanks to his concern of managing diversity in the most constructive manner, decided to build a rainbow nation where there will be no white, no black, no Indian, no Christian, no animist, but simply South African. And that is why I am glad that in the course of this Mandela Day, around this period, we are launching this project, and I wish Mandela also continue to inspire the entire world, which is unfortunately a world where we need everybody, member state, civil society, everybody should join efforts.
Gone but not forgotten, and an example that lives on in all of us, 67 minutes at a time. Sherwin Brycepease, SABC News, New York.
Now, various activities have been lined up in honor of International Nelson Mandela Day across the country. The Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, will be handing over an early childhood development center in Mokopong. The Transport Minister, Joe Mashangwani, will be painting a school and distributing sanitary towels to learners at Bochum, outside Polokwane. In the Eastern Cape town of Mthatha, residents are prepared to welcome hundreds of dignitaries and guests who will be attending celebrations.
Mthatha is expected to come to a standstill. Its most famous son will be celebrated. Locals and dignitaries reflecting on his life. The theme for this year is reconciliation and non-racialism.
We are specifically looking at non-racialism and also reconciliation, as we are expecting, people from other races as well.
The Michigan State University is a partner of the museum. Representatives of the university say the youth must remember that it is in their power to transform the education system of the country.
Black American in the United States, education has been something that we had to fight for. And if you want change to happen, you have to fight for those things. Caroling in the United States, we have the opportunity to go to school on particular grants and things of that nature, but it didn't come without a fight. So I stand by the students for their fight for access to a better education, because everyone cannot afford it, and so the government has to subsidize and assist in some type of way.
The 67 Minutes campaign also remains strong. Locals have committed themselves to it.
We are so grateful for this great opportunity that this Nelson Mandela birthday celebration will be held here in town. When the event is held in Uno, it's not so easy for everyone to access it or to come and attend the event. But now it has been brought in town so that everyone can have an access, everyone can come and celebrate Nelson Mandela Day.
We will be identifying two families. Then we go to shop and buy them some groceries or maybe some blankets, whatever they will be needing to celebrate the Mandela Day.
Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Nelson Mandela!
The museum says it has also recorded an increase of visitors since the beginning of the month. Simkita Mangunana, SABC News, Mthatha.
Meanwhile, at our neighbors here in Zimbabwe, many have also shared their thoughts about Nelson Mandela and what they will be doing today on Nelson Mandela Day.
When we talk of his life, we're talking of a role model. We're talking of a big achiever. We're talking of a big man in Africa. When we talk of Madiba, we're talking of breaking the chains of slavery. We're talking of liberating us economically, liberating us educationally.
For him to spend 27 years on that island, you had to be a man of composure. You had to be a man, of big inner strength. I would have just loved to ask him certain questions that, like how how did he compose himself, you know, when he was on that island? How did he keep himself sane? And to still come out and forgive people and say that, you know, I don't want us to fight anymore. How do you do that? Because normally if I have to come out of a situation like that, I'll come out with a lot of anger, a lot of bitterness.
I would pick a charity, then go visit kids and spend time with kids. That's what Madiba wanted. He loved kids, so we should spend time with children. They're the future of this world.
Well, I'll pray for him. There's nothing I can do now. He's late. I can only pray for his soul.
Nelson Mandela, we appreciate you and thank you very much for what you did for Africa. We will continue to live up that legacy. We will continue to do what we can as individuals, as Africans. I think we should all stand together and unite and say, you know, it is Africa's time.
An example of a leader who also knew it was time up and managed to move on, retire. So yeah, exemplary. I used to think that it wasn't fair what he did. He needed to get back and settle a couple of scores, but we can see the heart of forgiveness. I think that's the biggest lesson that we can learn.
Every good deed that goes towards developing yourselves and making sure that the young generation gets to know of a country's history is actually important. You know, there are some children who were born even after Mandela's death, but all they hear is what he did, you know, in books or something. So if South Africa takes time doing these good deeds, you know, it really gives an educational insight on who he was to the young generation.
Well, Zambia has also joined in the celebrations of Mandela Day. Our foreign editor spoke to the Zambian High Commissioner about Mandela Day.
Let me start first with Oliver Tambo. It was very personal to all of us because the struggle literally was being done from Zambia. The ANC were housed in Zambia. The name when the campaign to release Nelson Mandela started, we knew about it in our schools, in our districts, in our countries. And Nelson Mandela represented the values that we all cherish. And we are glad that when he was released and became a leader of this country, he lived up to the values that we had admired. The values and ethics that he left for leadership, especially political leadership, should be emulated by all. The good he brought to communities, the need to empower Africans with education and you know, self-sustenance program. We need to celebrate him and celebrate him for a very long time. So we wish South Africa a happy Nelson Mandela Day. As an embassy, we are participating together with other diplomats in activities that were given to us. We will be, I think, making some donations for material relating to education. We are celebrating the Nelson Mandela Day ourselves, and is not just a struggle icon for South Africa, is our struggle icon for Zambia, and that's the same story for Africa, and the same story for the world. In light of failing leadership, you know, he becomes a bar and standard for us to look to, so that we begin to measure ourselves. Are we living up to the values that Nelson Mandela? What would Nelson Mandela say in these circumstances that we are facing? So it's an important day, and we are glad that South Africa declared it as such. I wish that the rest of Africa can, because we hold him not just as a South African hero, as an African hero.
Yes, indeed, he was not just a South African, he was an African hero and a world hero, Nelson Mandela, of course, being celebrated today on the 18th of July. That's why we're asking you this question on your screen right now. What are you doing for your 67 minutes today in honor of the late Nelson Mandela? Let's take a quick look at some of your comments, what you're telling us. This one coming from Jamila van der Schuif says, we should make a change every day. All South Africans must try to find it in their hearts to love one another, irrespective of race. Wonderfully said, Jamila. Artini says, neighborhood cleanup. I love this particular one by Artini. Neighborhood cleanup armed with a plastic glove and black bags, only for 67 minutes. That makes a huge difference to your community. Do it right now if you haven't got anything else to do. But right now, Kendall Makhamate is standing by with your sports news.
Thank you very much, Elvis, and welcome back. Elvis wants to know what I've been doing for my 67 minutes for today, the 18th of July, 2017. Well, I've spent more time in the studio with him today than I have at any other time, and I believe I've got another 5 minutes to go before I hit my 67 minutes. Good morning to you. This is what we have for you. The South African cricket team has levelled the 4-match test series against England in emphatic fashion. Proteas beat the hosts, England, by 340 runs inside 4 days at Trent Bridge in the second test. Vernon Philander, who took 5 wickets in the match with figures of 3 for 24 in 10 overs yesterday, was voted man of the match.
With the pressure of the scoreboard firmly on them and a world record of 474 for victory, their target, England, needed to bat for full 2 days to save the test match. At the start of play, South Africa required 10 wickets from a minimum of 180 overs to level the series. And it quickly became evident that the match would not go the distance. England lost 4 wickets in the first session. Philander struck twice before Chris Morris accounted for the key batsman Alistair Cook for 42 and captain Joe Root for 8. The South African bowling unit was far from done. Kishaf Maharaj claimed the scalps of Ben Stokes and Moeen Ali just after lunch, and things then went from bad to worse for the English. Philander, who was very impressive in the test, dismissed Ben Stokes for 18, his 3rd wicket of the day. Dwayne Oliver took the last 2 wickets as England were bowled out in less than 2 sessions for just 133 runs.
This test match was important for us. If we get ourselves in the position of strength, how long we can force that period of almost dominating the opposition to stay on our side. And I thought that we did it brilliantly. You know, since day one, we haven't lost that momentum.
South Africa will look to replicate their second test all-round performance when the 2 teams meet again in the 3rd test at the Oval on the 27th of this month. Joseph Mohali, SABC News.
And of course, we're asking you today, having seen all of that over the last couple of days, what do you think the catalyst was in the Proteas' victory over England, especially after that dismal showing out at Lord's? Let's see what it is that you're saying on this particular issue. What do you think made the Proteas get over the line so well and so fast? First up, Proudy Koi Koi says, Fafa du Plessis is back. And Katlego says, I think the catalyst is the motivation from the women's team, and that pushed them to up their game. Maybe the fire is back. Big up to the Proteas. Yeah, no, definitely the fire is back, and it seems like everybody's talking about how well the Proteas and the women's Proteas have been doing. Speaking of which, South Africa's women's cricket team have been the revelation of the ICC Women's World Cup in England and Wales. Beating teams reckoned to be far better than them, they secured an historic semi-final berth at this year's tournament. The Momentum Proteas face off against England in the first semi-final of the 2017 ICC Women's World Cup in Bristol in a couple of minutes' time.
We came in with the back end of the season, so the wickets were a bit more worn. But very early in the tournament, I realised that I don't get a lot of turn on these wickets. So you have to find a way to take wickets at spinners, and I can't let my pace bowlers do everything. It's it's a long tournament, and their bodies are gonna feel it a bit. So I need to find a way for me and Tsuneki to bowl as many overs and take the load off them.
It should be very interesting to see how they go against England later today. Now, the Spar Baby Proteas have finished 6th at the Netball Youth World Cup in Gaborone, Botswana, after they were defeated 52-47 by Jamaica in the 5th place playoff in the Botswana capital. 6th place is one position worse than the 5th place they'd claimed at the previous World Cup in Glasgow, Scotland, 4 years ago.
The Baby Proteas were aiming to at least equal their performance in Scotland 4 years ago, but it was not to be, with the Jamaicans quick out of the blocks, building up an 8-2 lead before South Africa could find their feet. The South Africans clawed their way back, reducing Jamaica's lead at the end of the first quarter to a single goal at 9-8. But Jamaica kept the South Africans at bay in the final quarter to claim fifth place with a 52-47 victory.
Generally, in all honesty, I'm really disappointed because this was not the position that we had told ourselves we wanted to end in, and we really came out with good confidence and good effort that we at least end in the top 4, which wasn't in our favor, and we told ourselves the only favor that we can do ourselves is actually maintain our ranking, which wasn't even possible, so it's really disappointing.
The defeat itself was disappointing, but the manner in which they lost was more of concern. The shooting percentages were very low while they conceded 21 turnovers.
Lost against Jamaica, we lost against Australia, and we lost against New Zealand. 3 top teams in the world, and I don't think it's a real reflection of what happened at the tournament. So the 6th place isn't a reflection, and I just think that we still did really well. A bad draw, but that's something of the past, and now we need to just focus on how we can just move this team from one level to the next level.
The next Youth Netball World Cup in 2021 will move from the African continent to the Pacific Islands, where Fiji will host the world's best under-21 netball players. Pacing Gatlas, ABC News.
Now, I could not let you go without bringing this news about how a victorious Team South Africa arrived back from Kenya. The South Africans dominated the IWF World Under-18 Athletics Championships in Nairobi, topping the medals table with 11 podium finishes, 5 of them gold. South Africa's best ever performance in a major international athletics event.
As is tradition, South Africa's successful athletes were treated to a hero's welcome at OR Tambo's international arrivals. The triumphant 24-member team bagged 5 gold, 3 silver and 3 bronze medals. They beat more than 200 competing nations, including the likes of China, Cuba and hosts Kenya, to finish top of the medals table in Nairobi.
Oh, it was amazing. Like every day we did our best. We literally went in like focused and determined, and we came out victory as victors. I tried to keep them motivated, like determined and everything positive, because like for some of us it didn't go as planned but I just tried to keep everybody positive and motivated, and yeah, just try to keep them on the right path.
Richie Malinga was the standout performer for Team South Africa over the 5-day event, with 3 pieces of silverware to his name. The 17-year-old won gold in the 200 meters, silver in the 100 meters, and was a part of the 4x400 meters mixed relay team, which claimed 3rd place.
Through the hard work that me and my coach have put through, and God working through my coach, telling him what to do, and everything was smooth with my coach around, telling me what to do, where's my mistakes, and everything just went smooth.
Standing at just 1.72 meters in his socks, the diminutive Brayton Poole stunned the world by winning the high jump with a height of 2.24 meters.
African. Definitely my coach's work. My family, I also thank God for the talent he's given me. And yeah, all the hard work is finally paid off.
2 of the big countries, the United States and Britain, did not participate due to security reasons, but the high-powered performance was a coup for the young South Africans. They've sent a clear message that athletics in the country is certainly moving in the right direction.
Athletics is all about the support that you get from your coaches. You'll never be the greatest athlete. You'll never be a world champion without the support of your coach, without the support of other people who are working behind the scenes. But the critical thing is the coach and the athlete working together, setting standards and looking at what is happening in the world in their particular event, and set the bar all the time higher and higher. And this is the result of what the coaches have done.
The next Under-18 World Athletics Championships will take place in Finland in July next year. Samantha Mari, SABC News, Kempton Park.
Former Namibian sprinter Frankie Fredericks has been provisionally suspended from athletics pending an investigation into a potential ethics violation. Now, Fredericks is being investigated by the Athletics Integrity Unit over payments received from Papa Masata Diak, the son of the disgraced former IWF President Lamine Diak. In March this year, he quit as head of the IOC commission monitoring candidates for the 2024 Olympics amid an investigation into a $300,000 payment accepted from Diak. The 4-time Olympic silver medalist insists that the payments were for promoting athletics events. Fredericks received the money from Papa Diak on the 2nd of October in 2009, the very same day that Rio won the vote to host the 2016 Olympics. The African Sprinter Gate was set to lead the inspection visits to candidate cities of 2024. Los Angeles and Paris is now one of the most senior figures at the IOC and the IAAF. The IAAF has been at pains to point out that his suspension is really not a presumption of his guilt. That's where we leave it for today. Thanks very much for joining us. Sure hope that you enjoyed the day. Do remember, 67 minutes is all it takes. Find something to do, something positive to add cheer, to add goodwill to your fellow man out there. Some are donating blood, some are reading news, and some are cleaning up streets. Do something. Thanks very much for joining us. From me and the rest of the team that brought this to you live, Lisaneng Sin.